Every single year, NFL fans argue about which teams actually have the most talent, and every single year, it usually comes down to opinions, hot takes, and whoever yells the loudest on social media. But this time, it isn't a debate. This time, it's coming straight from the mouths of the people who actually build these rosters for a living, general managers, coaches, and scouts from across the entire league. And when they were asked to rank the best players in football at every single position, one team walked away with more elite talent than anybody else in the NFL. And it wasn't the Chiefs. It wasn't the Eagles. It was the Detroit Lions. Before we dive into just how ridiculous these numbers actually are, if you're new here, welcome to Detroit Scope. This channel exists to bring Lions fans the stories that matter, with the depth and the energy this fan base deserves. We are closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and we genuinely cannot get there without you. So if this video gets you fired up, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button before you head out. Now, let's get into these numbers because they are honestly stunning. Every year, ESPN runs one of the most respected exercises in football media. They survey executives, coaches, and scouts from across the league and ask them to rank the top 10 players at every single position in the sport. This isn't a fan poll. This isn't a bunch of talking heads arguing on television. This is the actual football industry telling us who they believe the best players in the game truly are. And when the entire series wrapped up this offseason, the results were almost impossible to believe if you didn't see them with your own eyes. The Detroit Lions landed 9 different players inside the top 10 at their respective positions. 9. No other team in the entire NFL came close. The next closest team, the Philadelphia Eagles, had 8. After that, the gap widens even further, with a group of contenders sitting several spots back. 9 top 10 players on one single roster is not just impressive. It's historically rare. But here's where it gets even more fascinating, because raw counting stats only tell part of the story. One insider took it a step further and built out a full point system to measure not just how many players made these lists, but how dominant they actually were within them. Here's how it works. If a player was ranked as the single best at his position in the entire NFL, he earned his team 10 points. Ranked second, 9 points. All the way down the list to 1 point for cracking the 10th spot. Even players who received honorable mention or who picked up a handful of stray votes got partial credit. It's a clever way of separating the teams that just barely snuck a player onto a list from the teams that are absolutely loaded with elite, top-of-the-position talent. And when all of that math was totaled up across the entire league, the Detroit Lions finished with a jaw-dropping 56.5 points. The next closest team? The Philadelphia Eagles, sitting all the way back at 42.75. That is not a narrow gap. That is a landslide. The Lions are not just ahead of the pack. They are in an entirely different weight class right now when it comes to sheer top-end talent. Now, let's actually walk through who's driving these numbers, because the list of names reads like a murderer's row of Detroit's core. It starts up front with offensive tackle Penei Sewell, who was ranked as the single best offensive tackle in the entire National Football League. Not top 5, not top 3. Number 1, at running back, Jahmyr Gibbs checked in at number 2 overall, trailing only one back in the entire league. At wide receiver, Amon-Ra, St. Brown landed firmly inside the top tier of pass catchers in football, with teammate Jameson Williams also picking up recognition. At tight end, Sam Laporta continues to be regarded as one of the very best at his position in the sport. On defense, Aiden Hutchinson remains one of the premier edge rushers in football, even coming off the kind of season that would have derailed a lesser player's reputation. And in the secondary, the Lions safety duo of Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph both landed inside the top 10 at their position, giving Detroit arguably the best safety tandem in the entire league. Even at quarterback, a position where Detroit doesn't always get the national respect some fans think it deserves, Jared Goff still found his way onto this list. And here's the twist that makes his inclusion even more interesting. Unlike almost every other position on this roster, quarterback is a spot where the general football wisdom says the prime years actually arrive a little later in a player's career, typically the early to mid-30s. So while Goff isn't the flashiest name on this list, he may genuinely be entering the best stretch of his career at exactly the right time, surrounded by a young, ascending supporting cast. And that brings us to the single most jaw-dropping part of this entire story. Look at almost every single name we just mentioned, and you'll notice something remarkable. These players are young. Not just talented young. Sewell is still in his mid-20s. Gibbs is still in his mid-20s. St. Brown, Hutchinson, Laporta, Branch, Joseph, Nearly every single one of these players is 26 years old or younger, with several of them still playing on their original rookie contracts. Compare that to the competition. Other teams that showed up near the top of these rankings are often leaning heavily on aging veterans well into their 30s to fill out their star power. Detroit is doing it with players who, in a lot of cases, haven't even hit the prime years of their careers yet. Think about what that actually means for the future of this franchise. This isn't a roster that peaked and is now hoping to squeeze one more run out of it before Father Time catches up. This is a roster that, by nearly every reasonable projection, should still be climbing. If a 24-25-year-old is already grading out as a top 2 or top 3 player at his position league-wide, the natural football expectation is that player still has real room to get even better. That is an absolutely terrifying proposition for the rest of the NFC North and, frankly, for the rest of the National Football League. So what does all of this actually mean heading into the new season? It means the conversation about Detroit's championship window needs a complete overhaul. For months, there's been chatter from outside the fan base questioning whether the Lions' window is already starting to close after a disappointing finish to last season. Based on these numbers, that entire premise falls apart. This isn't a team riding on the fumes of a veteran core. This is a team that, talent-wise, might not even be at its peak yet. If anything, the argument should be flipped completely on its head. The window isn't closing. It's just getting started. And here's an important point worth making clear. Elite rosters and elite coaching almost always go hand in hand. Look at the list of teams that landed near the top of these positional rankings alongside Detroit. The Eagles, the 49ers, the Chiefs, the Rams, the Texans, the Seahawks. Nobody looks at any of those organizations and questions whether they have good coaching staffs. That's not a coincidence. Teams that consistently develop and retain top 10 talent at multiple positions are, almost by definition, well-coached organizations. Dan Campbell and his staff deserve real credit here, because rosters this deep in blue-chip talent don't happen by accident, and they certainly don't stay that talented without a coaching staff that knows how to develop players and put them in position to succeed. It's also worth noting just how resilient these numbers are. Even if you strip away the points Detroit earned from its safety duo, both of whom are currently dealing with injury concerns that could sideline them for a chunk of the coming season, the Lions still finish comfortably in first place across the entire NFL. That's the kind of depth of talent we're talking about here. This isn't a house of cards that collapses the moment one position group takes a hit. This is a roster so deep in top-tier talent that it can absorb real injuries and still come out on top of the league in this metric. Does any of this guarantee anything on the field? Of course not. Talent alone has never been enough to win football games. Depth, health, scheduling, and 100 other variables all play a role in how a season actually unfolds. But when you combine this level of top-end talent with a favorable schedule on paper and a coaching staff that has already proven it can develop and maximize young players, it becomes very difficult to bet against Detroit heading into this season. There's a real argument to be made that this Lions team, given how young and dominant its best players already are, could be the kind of roster that other franchises look at the way the league once looked at recent Super Bowl contenders. That unmistakable sense of, these guys are simply built different this year. So here's what we want to know from you. Which Lions player do you think deserves to be ranked even higher than where ESPN's panel put him? Do you believe this roster is genuinely the most talented in football? Or is there a team out there you think should have topped this list instead? And most importantly, with this much young, ascending talent on the roster, is the Lions championship window really just getting started? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this video kept you locked in, do us a huge favor here at Detroit Scope. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next breakdown. We are working hard to hit 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching right now can help make that happen. Thanks for riding with us, Lions Nation. We'll see you in the next one.